chapter 13 is the beginning of the last 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. Omakyanatimarannasya jnana shlaka shakshamilitam yena tasmai shri gurave namah. Chichitayam anavishtam staptam yena bhutalishvam rupkadamayam dadati svam padantikam. Tandiyam shiru shiyuda padakamalam shirum vaishnavam shashyarupam sarjatam saganaragnatam patam sachivam sadvaitam sabrutam parjana saitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sakanalita Shivshakam Vitamsha Hey Krishna Karuna Sinu Dina Bandhu Tyapate Kaupesha Kopka Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchna Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanashve Vishabhana Sutta Devi Pranamama Haripriya Vanka Kalpa Vishake Pasan Vivsa Patnam Pavan Vyo Vashyam Vyo Namo Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Vistaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Chariswamiti Namane Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Vistaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachayani Nirvishishni Vadi Paskachai Desatani Srila Prabhupada. So here we have the last 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. Practically the most essential things have been said, especially in the 6 middle chapters. But now how to realize that? For this we need to direct our mind and senses with transcendental intelligence, Jnana. And therefore in the next chapters they are focused on Jnana. That Jnana that will help us to purify our heart and bring ourselves to the liberated position. And in the next chapter, Krishna will explain that in different ways. How by knowledge in this chapter of 6 subject matters. Kshetra, Kshetrajya, Jnanam, Jnanam, and Prakriti and Purush. These are the 6 subject matters that will be discussed in this chapter, which is the field of activities, which is the body, the knower of the field of activities, which is the spirit soul and the super soul. Both are knowers on a different level. And then we have the knowledge, especially about Kriyam, the super soul, a knowledge about the interaction between all these elements, the interaction between the super soul and Prakriti, and the importance of purifying our consciousness, the effect all Prakriti has on our consciousness. But we can purify our consciousness if we know our position as a spirit soul, and if we know that the super soul is controlling everything. So that knowledge will help us to attain liberation. And in the 14th chapter, the same will be explained. How we can liberate ourselves to get rid of the mode of passion and ignorance and to the mode of goodness. And then we can liberate ourselves. And in the 15th chapter, the same thing is explained with an analogy, the analogy of the banyan tree with its roots up, and so how one with knowledge and attachments must seek out the root of this tree and cut that root, So that's explained how we can attain liberation in that way. Then the 16th chapter explains the same thing. The same thing is explained there, that we have to give up demoniac qualities and develop divine qualities, and then we will be liberated. The same thing. In the 17th chapter, the same thing again, how to attain liberation. That, yes, how to attain liberation by understanding what's real faith, transcendental faith, and what's faith in the modes. That, and then we come to the 18th chapter, which is a summary of everything again, the whole Bhagavad Gita. Which is a summary of previous chapters. It's all sums up to the supreme conclusion. Sarva Dharma Prachyamam Kamsam Transarupabhya Mokseshat Imachucha. But now we will hear about these 6 subject matters. And Arjuna is asking about these 6 subject matters. And that's very interesting. He's between 2 parties on his chariot, and he has a philosophical discussion with Krishna. The biggest war ever is going to start. That we should, if we would be there, we would be very difficult to control our minds. But he's asking deep philosophical questions. What does it mean? Arjuna is not a conditioned soul like us. He's on a liberated platform very clearly. That is a pure devotee. Therefore, he's asking the right questions. So he's asking about the explanation of these 6 topics. Arjuna uvacha prakritim pusham shiva kshitam kshatrahyam evacha etat veditum ichami jnanam hyenam sakeshava. That's Arjuna's question, and Krishna replies, Shri Bhagavan uvacha idam sariram kantya kshatram iti avidyate itayo vetitam prahu kshatrahya iti tat vidi. Arjuna said, "Oh my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusa, the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field, and knowledge and the object of knowledge. So what is knowledge? And what is ignorance? You want to know what knowledge is? That's a good question." The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "This body, O son of Kunti, is called the field. One who knows this body is called the knower of the field." So this body is a field of activity of the conditioned souls. And we are situated within that field, and you cannot go beyond it. It's not possible. We are confined to this prison, which is the body. That it's like you have a house. I don't know here, but in England you have all their own garden, the houses. And you have a fence at every side of the garden, and the children are playing in that courtyard, but they cannot go out because they are restricted by the fences. So in the same way we are here to play with material nature, and that's our playground, the body. We cannot go out of it. And so according to his capacity to dominate material nature, he gets a field of activity. That's interesting. According to our capacity to dominate material nature, to control material nature, we get a field of activity. What we deserve by our karma. Now the person should not identify himself with the body. We should not identify ourselves with the playground. That the body is called, now the person who should not identify himself with the body is called kshetrajya, one who knows the body. We are conscious of the body. That I'm conscious of my body, what's going on, more or less, a bit, I would say, not much, because we are not always conscious. Oh, my heart is beating and the veins and these molecules and bacteria go there to arrange my digestion. No, we are not so conscious, but anyway, but we are conscious of the body. That certainly if someone injures you or someone comes to massage you with a machine, that you feel immediately that you are conscious of the body. That to that extent, any person can consider that from childhood to old age he undergoes many changes of body, and yet still one person is remaining. That's an interesting point. That according to the scientists, every 6 years all our cells are replaced. Because every 6 years you get a new body. But we feel ourselves still the same person. It's not that you go to the bank and you get a loan for your house and you have to pay back for 30 years. Then after 10 years you go to the bank, look, all my cells are changed, I'm not the same person anymore, so I don't have to pay back that loan anymore. I'm sorry, I'm different. No, we are still the same person. Even intuitively we feel we are still the same person. So the body changes, but the person remains the same. The person is a spirit soul. We know that we are different from the things used. So we are using the body. That we are not the body. But the mind made us think, cheats us, that we are the body. And by that, that's the cause of our suffering. So the 13th chapter, now starting with the 13th chapter, how the living entity comes in contact with material nature. How did we come to identify with this body? That's because contact of material nature will be explained further. And now we see delivered by the Supreme Lord to different methods of fruitive activities. Cultivation of knowledge and the discharge of devotional service are explained. How we can liberate from that misconception that we are the body. So that's the first two verses. So that, yes. Two main points. Living entity receives a certain body according to his capacity to dominate material nature. Second, one who identifies himself with the body is called kshetrajya, the knower of the body. The knower is different from the body, as the possessor of something is different from what he possesses. So, we use the body. Yes, to learn to use the body in the service of Krishna. Body, minds and words. BMW, never forget. But, point 3. Text 3, I mean. Kshetrajam sapimam vidi. Kshetre subharatam. Kshetra nirogyanam. Yattatsyanamatam mama. A sign of Bharat. You should understand that I'm also the knower in all bodies. And to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. So to understand this body and its knower. Knowledge means means understanding the difference between matter and spirit. The body, the material body, and the spirit soul, the knower. So while discussing the subject of the body and the knower of the body, the soul and the super soul, we shall find three different topics of study: the Lord, the living entity, and matter. The Lord, the living entity, the jiva, you who are in the heart of this body, and the body and everything what around us is matter. In every field of activities, in every body, there are two souls, the individual soul and the super soul. The jiva, the spirit soul, is in the heart. We learned in the first chapter of the Gita, 1/10,000th of a tip of a hair. That's not much. We are not very big, but we think we are very big. That's us, and then we have the super soul besides. In the Svetasvatara Upanishad, and Srila Prabhupada refers to that Svetasvatara Upanishad, that it's like two birds sitting in a tree, and one bird is eating the fruit. We came here to get the fruits, eating the fruits, and the other bird is the witness, and the permitter, and the observer. We will learn that's the super soul. Krishna says, I'm also the knower, but I am not the individual knower of the body. I'm the super knower. I'm present in every body as the Paramatma or the super soul. The Lord says, I'm the knower of the field of activities in every individual body. The individual body may be the knower of his body, but is not in knowledge of other bodies. So we know our playground, but we don't know the playground of others. I know what's going on to a certain extent in my body, but I don't know what's going on in one's other's bodies. So that's the difference between the super soul and us. The super soul knows what's going on in all bodies, because it gives them a body according to their karma and the reactions according to their karma. It's super knowledge that it's beyond our comprehension. That God knows everything what happens in the future, whatever know what will happen, in the past and in the future, and He knows what all living entities has done in their past lives, and gives them their reactions. That's quite supercomputer. And gives them their reactions and combines such. It makes so much combinations of people with the same karma. And anyway, that's the super soul is, all cognizant. Samadhyasyatam vayatita itaras shartes abhya svarat abhya, all cognizant. We cannot not grasp that with our intelligence. But He's always with us. Krishna never left us. He's just in our heart. How do we know Krishna in our heart? Because He controls material nature. He controls our body. He gives us intelligence, He says. He does all these things. So that's also other ways to know also. Like Mother Teresa used to say that her service to God was giving her great satisfaction in the heart. So that's that satisfaction of, if we do selfless service, is if a mother serves the child, she feels satisfied by that. Every mother knows that. Why is that satisfaction coming? You give without asking something in return. So by that, this sense of, there are so many monks and nuns all over the world. They do selfless service for God or for humanity, and they feel some level of satisfaction in the heart. It's Krishna in the heart who gives that sense of satisfaction. It's saying that's good. But if one commits murder or does something very abominable, then after stealing or after committing a crime, does the criminal feel happy inside? No, he will feel great guilt. Guilt comes up. That's Krishna from in the heart that's saying that's not so good. So by that, so many ways we can know the super soul is there. The king is the original proprietor of the kingdom, and the citizens are the secondary proprietors. So Krishna is the proprietor of everything. We are only secondary. The secondary proprietor. We have to give it back to the first proprietor. The body is called Kshetra, and within it dwells the owner of the body and the Supreme Lord, who knows both the body and the owner of the body. Therefore he is called the knower of all fields. He knows all fields, what's going on in all bodies. But we know only what's going on in our field of activities. Perfect knowledge of the constitution of the body, the constitution of the individual, and the constitution of the super soul is known in Vedic literature as Jnana. Here we come to knowledge, perfect knowledge. Srila Prabhupada says that one must know the constitution of the body, constitution of the soul, and the constitution of the super soul, and how they interact with each other. That's deep knowledge. One has to understand the position of Prakriti, nature, Purus, and joy of nature, and Ishvara, the knower who dominates and controls nature and the individual soul. So here Srila Prabhupada is referring to 3 of the 5 topics of Bhagavad Gita. You may remember the 5 topics. Is it difficult to understand what are these 5 topics? That I was wondering, because Bhagavad Gita is discussing these 5 topics. That can be explained this to a child. In 2011, that was the first year that the Krishna Avanti school was open in Leicester. And there one morning, the morning I was with the children, it was interesting. It's how they start their morning. They come together before Krishna Balaram. They were 5 years old. It was the beginning of the school. Even the first year was not there. It was the pre-primary school, they call it. Yeah. And so they were with 40 pupils, yeah. And 2 of them got, 3 of them got an instrument. One got a small mridanga, another kartals, and the other another instrument. And they had their Mangala Arti. They were chanting the pranam of Srila Prabhupada, Panchtattva mantra, and then Hare Krishna mantra. And then after that, they have a class of 5 minutes. And we had had to explain to them these 5 topics of Bhagavad Gita. And they got it quite quickly. That at the end, I asked them, who is Ishvara? They said, Krishna. Who is Jiva? We. And what is Prakriti? Oh, that's everything around us. What is karma? That's what we do. And what's Kala? And one of the young boys raised his hand and said, I'm always too late in school. So they understood it's not so difficult to understand this. But this chapter is about the interaction between all these. If we don't understand how they interact with each other, then we cannot liberate us. Therefore this jnana is important. But one should not confuse the painter. Who is the painter? It's Ishvara. He paints the body. We get the body. And then we have the painting. The painting and the easel. Yeah. So the Purush, the living entity, we are painted in it. And then you have the easel, that's Prakriti, material nature.
What is easel?
Easel is something like that, but it goes up and they put a painting on it. There's easel and ass. Easel means ass in Flemish. Easel, that's the same. Anyway, it takes the burden of weight. In this chapter, it will also be explained that out of the 2 knowers, one is fallible and the other is infallible. So that's the difference between us and the super soul. We are fallible. We can come under the influence of this material nature. And then we fall from our position, or we forget our awareness as a spirit soul. One is superior and the other is subordinate. That's the difference between the super soul and the soul. We are subordinate. And the super soul is the Ishvara, the controller. One who understands the 2 knowers of the field to be one and the same contradicts the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who states here very clearly. So there's a difference between the super soul and the soul. I'm also the knower of the field of activity. One who misunderstands a rope to be a serpent is not in knowledge. See a serpent and you think it's a rope and you want to take the rope. What's going to happen? It's a fearful condition. Or you, in the other way, you take a rope to be a snake. Always in psyche. So Krishna explicitly says here that real knowledge is to know that the super soul is a controller of both the field of activities and the finite enjoyer. He controls both, because we are both material and spiritual energies are under the control of Krishna. Okay, so summary, what have we learned here? The Supreme Lord is the proprietor, controller and knower of all bodies, whereas the Jiva is the proprietor, controller and knower only of his own body. They are mini-controllers. Knowledge means to understand the position of Prakriti, Purush, and Ishvara. These 3 things, Prakriti, Purush, that's we. Prakriti is material nature, and Ishvara is God, or the super soul here. 4. Tat kshetram yasa yat riksha yat vikar yat asayat sasayo yat pabhavashatat samay sameshvinu. Now please hear my description of this field of activity and how it is constituted, what its changes are, whether it is produced, who that knower of the field of activities is, and what its influences are. So, text 5. Eshabir Bautagitam Shantaver Fitadam Pitak Pamasutra Pata Shiva Etamat Verfinishita. So here Krishna is going to speak about authority. That so you may have to write an essay on authority. Good verse. The knowledge of the field of activities and the knower of the field of activities is described by sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as the cause and effect. That so Krishna says here, yes, you are the sages and the scriptures, sadhu and shastra. And who is instructing? Krishna is the supreme guru. Guru, Shada, Shastra, we have in this verse. Learned scholars and standard authorities always give evidence from previous authorities. Not like I'm writing a chapter on the history of ISKCON in Europe, in different countries. And it's academic writing. You must always refer to your authorities. Where is that information coming from? Is this a scholarly source? That how did you get it? You have to explain. So if we preach always, we must explain or base it on Shastra. Like quoting from a law book. This is our law books. That's because the problem is that we are too absorbed in the playground and we don't see reality. We take the playground as our reality. So we cannot see beyond the playground. But the sages can, the Shastra can. So always quote from that. That's preaching. Preaching is quoting and give some examples and maybe some experiences. That's yes. People are not much used to say to me. Yeah. Preaching means yes, you repeat the words of the previous acharyas, you quote verses, references, give some examples, and you tell a joke between. Because otherwise it's too boring for me. Make it interested according to the audience. That's important. Yeah. The higher and lower nature exist due to ignorance and are being manifested in an infinite number of living entities. But the supersoul, which is infallible, is uncontaminated by the three modes and is transcendental. That's the difference. Now that it said, and that's interesting in this purport, that as stated before, kshetra is the field of activities, and there are two kinds of kshetra: the individual living entity and the supreme entity. So, and then it's a part of so as a living entity we are in this playground and we can develop different kinds of consciousness, and we go to these different stages of consciousness. Here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada refers to the Taittiriya Upanishad, Brahma Pucham Pratistam. These are 5 levels of consciousness described. And to come to the consciousness of understanding that the super soul controls everything, to see the reality, one must come to spiritual consciousness. That's called Anandamaya. But mostly, we are born, and babies or animals, they have a consciousness called Annamaya. Annamaya. Annamaya means food consciousness. Animals are always after food, food, food. That's the lowest consciousness. One cannot go beyond the field. Anyway, the 3 higher stages are also in the field. Because after Annamaya, one comes to Pranamaya. One understands, I'm not the only who is after food, there are also others, and I have to defend myself. One becomes conscious, there are also others who are after food. And then Pranamaya. Pranamaya, that's a higher consciousness. After Pranamaya comes Manamaya or Jnanamaya. There, one discovers, I'm thinking, feeling, and willing. And one becomes interested in thinking, and one gets interested in philosophy, in science, in culture. All these things are activities where the mind is central. That's a little higher consciousness. But then a higher consciousness than this Jnanamoya or Manamoya, with the mind, thinking and willing, is Vijnanamoya. In Vijnanamoya, the living entity starts to wonder, who am I? Am I this body? Am I this mind? One studies the scriptures, and one develops real knowledge of what's going on between the super soul, the soul, material major, how it interacts. One gets knowledge. But then that's still material consciousness. Because one is still not liberated, but one can liberate oneself by following this. And then one comes to Brahman realization and comes into Anandamoya, beyond. Anandamoya is spiritual consciousness. And then we see the reality. So therefore, this is described him here. If the living entity decides to enjoy in dovetailing himself with the Anandamoya, then he becomes perfect. Then we see things as they are in spiritual consciousness. So one has to see for this truth in the Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra. Because the Bhagavatam is the commentary on Vedanta Sutra. Text 6 and 7. Mahabhutan hankaro buddhi avyaktamiva sa indriyani dasaikam sa pancha sandriya gochara itva dveshukam dukam sangrata sitatatriti etakshatra samasana sapika mudarita. The 5 great elements, false ego, intelligence, unmanifested, the senses and the mind, the 5 sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, desire, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms and convictions, and these consider in summary to be the field of activities. So here you have a whole list of things, what the components of the kshetra. That all all the desires that come up into the mind, that all the convictions, I'm thinking I'm this, I'm that, that's the senses, the mind, 5 sense objects, hate and happiness, that distress, that's all the body. It's not us. We are not related to this in distress of the happiness of the body, but we connect to it with the mind by identifying ourselves with this body. And that's a very important element, very important to understand and to realize that everything that's going on in his mind and so on, that it's just an absorption in this field of activities and its interaction. And we become, by that absorption, we become entangled in this world. So, it's in the purport, a few points. So there are the false ego, intelligence, and the unmanifested states of the 3 modes. These are the 5 elements. Then there are 5 senses for acquiring knowledge. 5. And what are these senses for acquiring knowledge that we have? We are analyzing the field. The field has 24 elements. And the first 5, well, the first 8 elements, it starts with that.
Senses for acquiring knowledge.
First 8 elements are Bhumi, Apo, Nala, Vayur, Kam, Mana, Buddha, Ahankar, Ityane, Bina, Prakriti, Ashtata. Ashtata means 8 separate material elements. 7 for Bhagavad Gita. Earth, air, ether, water, fire, mind, intelligence, false ego. 8 elements. So we have 8. And besides these 8, there is also a ninth one, the unmanifested states of the 3 modes of material nature. That comes before, because it's that unmanifested stage that interacts with false ego, and that creates all the rest. That's called pradhan, or the unmanifested state of Prakriti. So these are 9 elements. And then 9 plus 5. 5 are the senses for acquiring knowledge. It's 13. It's 9 plus 5 is 14, right?
9 is the 8 elements plus pradhan.
Pradhan. Okay. Yeah. Then there are 5 senses for acquiring knowledge. The eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the skin. Someone touches us, we get knowledge. Oh, someone is touching us. Right? These are 14, and then 5 more. 5 working senses. Then we come to 19. The voice, the legs, the hands, the anus, and the genitals. They are working. Then above the senses there is the mind, in which within, and which can be called the sense within. Therefore, including the mind, there are 11 senses together. So we had 19, now 5 more. Then there are the 5 objects of the senses. That's smell, taste, form, touch, and sound. These are the 5 objects. They are also part of the material elements. Now the aggregate of these 24 elements is called the field of activity. That's the field of activity. So at your exam you get a question that's, please list the 24 elements of the field of activities. What are you going to write?
All these things.
Yeah. Okay. If one makes an analytical study of these 24 subjects, then he can very well understand the field of activities. Then there are desire, hatred, happiness and distress, which are interactions, representations of the 5 great elements in the gross body. The symptoms represented by consciousness and convictions, and the manifestation of the subtle body, mind and ego and intelligence. These subtle elements are included within the field of activities. They are subtle elements. Convictions, manifestation, yeah. They are manifestation of the subtle body, our thinking, feeling, willing, and also manifestations of the subtle body. But, yes. Thinking, feeling, willing means creating convictions and so on.
We have to write them on Sanskrit or in English, these 24 elements in the exam.
I don't know the questions.
In English.
In English.
It depends what the question is. And I don't know them. I didn't look at them. The exam is in my suitcase. I did not look at it.
No, he asked about the 24 elements.
Yeah.
Should we write them in Sanskrit or in English?
It depends. If the question of the exam is write them in Sanskrit, yes. But if it says only English, then it's only in English. That's what I can say. I don't know the question. So. But yes, it's good to know that yes. The 5 great elements are a gross representation of the false ego. Dus Bhumi, Rapo, Nala, Fire, Kam, they are gross representations of false ego. And that's therefore, again, Taran Krishna Prabhu, the Bhagavatam, explains how these gross elements come into being as an interaction between false ego and the unmanifested modes of nature. Yeah, there it interacts and then it becomes prakriti. All these things are created.
This is in the second canto.
And in the third canto. Twice it's completely explained. 2 times it's completely explained. That's again the relationship. That's all explained in the Bhagavatam. That the body is a representation of all these factors. And there are changes of the body, which are 6 in number. The body is born, it grows, it stays, it produces byproducts, children, it begins to decay, and at last it vanishes. Therefore the field is non-permanent material thing. However, the Kshatrasya, the knower of the field, is the proprietor, is different. And then Krishna gives a definition of knowledge. And he says, this is knowledge, and the rest is ignorance. And these 21 elements are points here are very important. That there are in these 24 elements, there are 2 elements which are important. They are all important, but these are the most important. And the first element is taking shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. And the second element is unalloyed devotion. Because if one follows the instructions of the spiritual master and develops unalloyed devotion, all the other qualities will, all the other things will manifest. We will realize them. And that's the way to get out of the entanglement of material nature. So this is the real process of knowledge. It's not good that Lokagu probably is not here. This is such an important point. We misses that. If one accepts this process, then the possibility of approaching the absolute truth is exist. Let's first read all the elements. Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the object of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of evil of birth and death, old age and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness, the most pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization, the philosophical search for the absolute truth. All this I declare knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be is ignorance. So Lokaguru Prabhupada explained that this 25 is what Krishna says is knowledge. The rest is ignorance. And from these 21 points, there are two important. Approaching a bona fide spiritual master and unalloyed devotion. Because if one develops, engages in devotional service under the direction of a spiritual master, the other points will develop. And this is the way to get out of the entanglement of material nature. Realizing these points, not just, it must become realized, these points. And in the purport, it is the longest purport. This is the longest purport, or nearly the longest purport in Bhagavad Gita. Because Srila Prabhupada is elaborating on each of these points. That we won't have the time to go to all of this, but this is this list that gives us an idea of our own spiritual advancement. Go over these 21 points and reflect to what extent have I realized this. And you will know your own level of spiritual advancement. But this is all explained in the purport, and like Srila Prabhupada gives definitions of all these points. He says, humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. Honor or dishonor pertaining to this body is useless. We have to realize that. If you are dishonored whole your life, or you are honored your whole life, what's the result? You have to die. Doesn't have any meaning. We have to realize that. As for actual advancement in spiritual science, one should have a test to see how far he is progressing. He can judge by these items. That's what I just said. That's just by these items, how much are advanced. Another definition, a stunning definition of Srila Prabhupada on non-violence. Non-violence is generally taken to mean not killing or destroying the body, but actually non-violence means not to put others in distress. You put others in distress by engaging them in material activities. Unless you give Krishna consciousness to someone, you commit violence. Simplicity means without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. that does not mean that you can preach straightforward in all circumstances. That Prabhupada never said, oh, this Swami, and he is a fool. He would not name persons. He will always speak in general terms, preaching according to time, place and circumstances. It's still straightforward, but careful. That should not be misunderstood. I'm straightforward. I tell the truth straightforward. This is Brahman, and a family comes and they are traveling on the road, and he sees them going further and then taking the road at the right side. And then some dacoits, robbers, come, and they see the Brahmin and they said, did you see this family? You want to rob them? Where did they go? And the Brahmin would say straightforward, the truth. Yes, they went right. Yeah. But what's the result? They will be killed.
And also it's counteracting ahimsa. So it's like
putting others in distress. Yeah, that's a good point. That's all going together. Cleanliness, two kinds of cleanliness: internal, external. External, taking a bath. Internal cleanliness, every morning chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Yeah. The tongue should always engage in tasting the remnants of food put offered to Krishna and chant Hare Krishna. Devotional service is the main sole objective. There is no other subject in Bhagavad Gita than devotional service. Quite a straightforward message of Prabhupada. One should try to understand the distress of accepting birth, death, old age and disease. Whatever you do in Krishna consciousness, which is not in Krishna consciousness, means you are creating future bodies. You remain in birth, death, old age and disease. So many points. Don't have the time to go in all of them. Text 13. In text 13, Krishna speaks about the individual soul, and in text 14, he will speak about the super soul. Verse 13. Hyam yatat pravakshami yatta pamrita bhasnute anadi mat param brahma nasatana shatuchate. I shall now explain the noble, which you will taste the eternal. Brahman, the spirit beginningless and subordinate to me, lies beyond the cause and effect in this material world. So he starts to explain the knowable. The knowable are these 6 subject matters, and here that first he speaks about the soul and then the super soul. That in the purport, there is no specific date that the jiva was born, nor can anyone trace out the history of the jivatma's manifestation from the Supreme Lord. The knower of the body is never born and never dies, and is full of knowledge. Living entities are eternally in the service of the Supreme Lord. This is also conferred by Lord Chaitanya. There is a description of Brahman mentioned in this verse in relation to the individual soul. The description in this verse is related to the individual soul. Because here Krishna says subordinate to me in the verse, subordinate. The soul is subordinate to the super soul. Therefore this verse is about the soul. And the next verse is about the super soul. Sarvata panipadam tat sarvatoksishiromakam sarvata shutimaloke sarvamavritya tishtati. Everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes, heads and faces, and he has ears everywhere. In this way the super soul exists, pervading everything. So here are the characteristics of the super soul. We have seen the universal form in the previous chapter. Krishna had so many heads, so many hands, so many eyes. So, because all eyes, all legs, they belong to him. And he manifests them as the super soul. It's why the presence of the all-pervading super soul that things are going on. That's the super consciousness that makes everything work. That as the sun exists diffusing its unlimited rays, so does the super soul, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He exists in his all-pervading form, and in him exist all the living entities, beginning from the great teacher Brahma to the small ants. So it is. This means that the individual soul, having become conditioned by material nature, is not supreme. Further, if the Lord is a far distance away, how can he accept things? We have heard Patram Pushtam Flamtram Yomi Bhakti Prabhava. So offer me a fruit, water, a leaf. That's, if he's in Goloka Vrindavan, how can he accept? Because he's at the same time all pervading. His hands are everywhere to accept, and his ear is everywhere to hear. Therefore, this further describes the Supreme Soul, the Personality of Godhead, not the individual soul. So, the Super Soul can accept everything from a distance place. Text 15. Sarvendriya gunabhasam sarvendriya vivarchitam asaktam sarvabriksheva nirgunam gunabhuktacha. The Super Soul is the original source of all senses, yet is without senses. At least, no material senses. He is unattached, although he is a maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time is the master of the modes of material nature. That's interesting. He's not under the laws of material nature. He makes the laws working and exist. Actually, the individual soul have spiritual senses, but in a conditioned life they are covered with material elements. Shall I read that again? Actually, the individual souls have spiritual senses, but in the conditioned souls they are covered with material elements. So we have our arm here, and there is a spiritual arm, but it's covered by a subtle arm, a mental arm, and a gross arm. A subtle and a gross body is covering it. And Krishna consciousness is the process to uncover it, to remove the coverings. And the Supreme Lord's senses are not so covered. He lives within the heart of the living entity, and he knows what we have done in the past, what we are doing now, and what is awaiting for us in the future. You cannot hide anything for Krishna. He knows everything already. There is no need even to pray to Krishna, in that sense, for fulfillment of material desires. Krishna knows your desires already. That's important information. He is the maintainer of all living entities and the witness of all activity. As far as we can understand from Vedic literature, the Supreme Lord is always transcendental. Due to material contaminated senses, we cannot see his form. He's in our heart, but we cannot see him with these blunt material senses. We need, as we heard before, to smear our eyes with love of God. Then we can see him. So that's text 16. Bhait ananta sabhutanam achram charamevasham suksmatvat tat avihyam durastam santike satat. Yeah. The Supreme Truth exists outside and inside of all living beings, the moving and the non-moving. Because he is subtle, he is beyond the power of the material senses to see or to know. Although far away, he is also near to all. That's also in the Shisa Upanishad. He is far away and is nearby. He walks and he does not walk. Do you know someone who walks and does not walk and who is far away and nearby at the same time? So we don't have that experience, because we are thinking in terms of the field of our playground. And we cannot think in terms of what's happening beyond that. There are other dimensions on the material platform and the spiritual platform. We cannot think about these things. So he's present in both the spiritual and material worlds at the same time. In Vedic language it is said that to understand him, our material mind and senses cannot act. Because he's spiritual and our material mind and senses, it's material. With something material you cannot understand something spiritual. It's not possible. But one who has purified mind and senses, spiritual mind and senses, then purified means we get back our spiritual mind and senses. By practicing Krishna consciousness in devotional service, we can see him constantly. So, 1154, you may remember, Krishna said to Arjuna, you can know me as I'm standing before you only by Ananya Bhakti, only by unalloyed devotional service. Text 17, still about the super soul. Avibhaktam sabhutishu vibhaktam ivasastitam Buddha Bhatri Satachhyayam Yashishnu Bhavavishnusam. Although the super soul appears to be divided among all living beings, he is never divided. He is situated as one. Although he is the maintainer of every living entity, it is to be understood that he devours and develops all. The purport. The Supreme Lord, although the maintainer of every living entity, devours everything at the time of annihilation. This is confirmed in the 11th chapter when the Lord says that he has come to devour all the warriors assembled at Kurukshetra. He also mentioned that in the form of time he devours also, is annihilator, the killer of all. So he makes them develop and then destroy. That's material life. Nothing is permanent. Gaudisama pitachotis tamasa paramuchate jnanam jnanam yam eti sarvasya vishtitam. It is the source of light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. He is knowledge. He is the object of knowledge. He is the goal of knowledge. He is situated in everyone's heart. So the Lord is the goal of knowledge. Because only when we know Krishna we can understand who we are and what our real position is, our action, our real duty, or or the natural activity of the spirit soul, we first have to know Krishna. That we have heard that in the 5th chapter already, that Krishna says, yes, when one is in knowledge, it's like the sun lighting up everything. Everyone sees everything clearly in the daylight. When it is dark, we cannot see that. Yes. Is the source of light in all luminous objects, is beyond the darkness of matter, and is unmanifested. Is knowledge. If we come in contact with Krishna, then we get real knowledge. His knowledge is transcendental. The Vedic literature confirms that Brahman is concentrated transcendental knowledge. To one who is anxious to be transferred to the spiritual knowledge, to the spiritual world, knowledge is given by the Supreme Lord, who is situated in one's heart. So we have heard Tadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. Only by knowing him can one surpass the boundaries of birth and death. That Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Prabhu or Master of all living entities. Therefore, he is the ultimate shelter of all living entities. There is no denying the fact that the Supreme Super Soul and the individual soul are always different. And now the last section about this field of activity. Thus the field of activity, knowledge and the knowable have been summarily described. Only my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus attain my nature. So this knowledge is of 3 things: the knower, the knowable, and the process of knowing. 3 things you have to know. That you must know who is the knower, spirit soul, the super soul. You have to know what's knowable. All these 24 elements. That's practically. And then the process of knowledge. Approaching a spiritual master, engaged in devotional service, and one develops that knowledge. Combined these, they are Vijnan, so or science of knowledge. At your exam there is a question, explain what is Vijnan. That Vijnan is a science of knowledge, the combination of these 3 things: knower, the knowable, and the process of knowledge. That
Vijnan is the combination of all these 3.
Yeah. Combined these are called Vijnan. That's because you must combine them. You must go to the process of knowledge, and then you will know the knower and the knowable. And that going to the process will lead to Vijnan. Then we have perfectly combined them. In other words, knowledge is nothing but the preliminary states of understanding of devotional service. And that's important. All that knowledge is meant to liberate us from our entanglement. And if when we are liberated, when our consciousness is liberated from that, we can fix our mind with devotion on Krishna, identify with our real self. And then real life begins. Spiritual life starts after liberation. So Brahman is not the purpose. It starts after Brahman, the real life. That does not mean that in the conditioned life, in the conditioned state, you cannot start practicing that real life already and experience this already before that. The 3 items have been described: the field of activity, the body, the process of understanding, and both the super soul, the soul and the super soul. And this afternoon we are missing 2, Prakriti and Purush. We will discuss Prakriti and Purush this afternoon. So Any questions? Yes.
Maharaj, what is the difference between the object of knowledge and the goal of knowledge? Object and goal.
Object of knowledge and the goal of knowledge. That the goal of knowledge is to attain the position of devotional service. That's the goal of this knowledge. And the object of knowledge, the object of knowledge is everything what we can observe, material and spiritual. But finally, it's all Krishna. It's all a manifestation of Krishna, material and spiritual worlds. All more. Because in this world, that our disease is our consciousness, which is absorbed in a separatist mentality. That separatist mentality is to see everything different from Krishna and does not see Krishna in the material nature. But the material nature is also a representation of Krishna. It works to it, to the super soul, is the active principles of material nature. So, in a real sense, object of knowledge is also Krishna. That's all material and spiritual manifestations are coming from him.
So the object is the spiritual and the material manifestation.
Yeah. Object means we see the super soul in everyone, in everything. That's then when it comes to Vidya Vinaya Sampana Brahmana Kana Ashtin Sunshesha Bhagacha Panada Samadakshan. One sees the super soul in the heart of a dog, in the heart of a Brahman, an elephant. Yes. Good. Something else? And we continue this afternoon. If you have questions, write them down. You can ask them this afternoon. Thank you. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki.
Jai.